Hello.
My name is Delara Whitmore, and last week, my sister broke into my lake cabin with 4 men and a forged eviction notice. While I was sitting inside with the state attorney general, the key didn't jam. It turned smoother than I remembered, like the lock had already given up trying to resist. My fingers paused at the edge of the knob, pressing into the cold brass, waiting for something, anything, to feel real. But all I heard was the wind skimming across the lake behind me and the gravel still settling under my boots. It wasn't just quiet. It was hollow. The kind of silence that doesn't invite peace, but hides something. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old coffee and lemon oil. The cabin should have felt like mine. It was mine. But something was off. The blinds were drawn. Lights off. Yet it didn't feel untouched. It felt tampered with. I stepped inside slowly, my boots thudding against the worn wood floor. That's when I saw it, taped to the fridge, not the door. A piece of paper, wrinkled, printed on cheap inkjet paper. Eviction notice. I didn't move. My eyes scanned the lines without reading them. The name at the top, D. Whitman, wasn't even mine. Wrong name. Wrong font. Wrong everything. Smudged ink from a sweaty hand. Probably hers. Off-brand HOA seal pasted in the corner like a grade school art project. They didn't even try to make it look real. They didn't even try to get my name right. They erased me before they even began. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. That's where it all started. I walked further in, every board under my foot groaning like it was warning me. The living room looked untouched, too neat. The coffee table had a single mug on it. It wasn't mine. It was still wet inside. I hadn't made coffee yet. I wasn't the first one in. The door slammed open behind me. Callista didn't knock. She never did. She swept in like a breeze that didn't ask permission, her coat still fluttering behind her. 4 men followed. I didn't recognize them, but I recognized the way they moved. Like they weren't here to talk. "You're not supposed to be here," she said, tossing her hair like she was on stage. "Read the notice." My hand curled around the strap of my bag. I didn't turn to face her. "It's my name on the deed." Her voice dropped into a chill-eyed known since childhood. Was. I finally turned, slowly. She was standing near the window now, arms crossed, tapping her finger against her hip, like she was keeping time. The men spread out. One leaned against the doorframe, another stood by the kitchen counter, eyeing the knife block. One of them spoke, his voice like gravel. "Accidents happen in quiet places like this." I didn't answer. My fingers grazed the pocket knife, still clipped to my jeans. I didn't draw it. I just needed to feel it there. Breathing stayed slow, controlled. I stared at Callista and said nothing. This wasn't fear. This was accounting. For every word they just said, for what it would cost them. I knew what they were doing. I knew what she was doing. "You've gone too far," I said finally. My voice was low, calm. I made sure of it. She tilted her head.
No, Delara.
"You stayed too long." That line, it landed. Like a slap, without sound. Looking back now, I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. The man by the counter lifted the coffee mug. He sniffed it, then looked over at me, confused. He realized what I had already figured out. They'd been here first. My heart didn't race. It went quiet. Too quiet. I walked past them slowly. No rush in my steps. Reached for the mug. Held it in my hand. It was cold. Stone cold. Not even a hint of warmth left in the ceramic. They'd been here longer than I had. They weren't waiting to deliver a message. They were waiting to see if I'd leave on my own. That's the part they never understood. I had nowhere left to go. They had already decided I didn't belong there. But this morning, this meeting would prove them wrong. Or at least, I still clung to that illusion as I stepped into the heavy mist that coated the community lot. The hall stood like it always did, gray aluminum siding, flickering porch light, crooked sign that read, HZ Member Commons. It wasn't welcoming. It was waiting. I tightened my grip on the folder I had prepared the night before. A simple speech.
Dates.
Deed references. HOA charter clauses. All facts. All legal. All mine. My father's flannel jacket was wrapped around me like a memory I didn't ask for. I wasn't wearing it to feel warm. I wore it because I remembered who gave me this place, and who they were pretending never had. As I approached the building, a boy on a red bike slowed beside me. He couldn't have been more than 10. "Are you the lady who tried to steal the cabin?" he asked, too loud, too innocent. I didn't answer, just kept walking. Looking back now, I should have said something, anything, but silence was safer and easier to bury. That's where it all started. Inside the hall, the stale scent of burned coffee mixed with plastic folding chairs and too much aftershave. The crowd was mostly familiar faces. People I'd waved at for years, exchanged holiday cards with, nodded to while collecting mail. Now, they wouldn't meet my eyes. Callista sat near the front in a beige coat that looked too pristine for her to own. She smiled like she was in church. Vera, my mother, sat beside her, hands folded in a way that said she was not here for drama, but absolutely planned to witness it. I walked to the front, stepped toward the mic. "My name is Delara Whitmore." The mic died. No static, just silence. I glanced over. Callista had her hand on the switch. She stood up, all fake grace. "My sister's been under a lot of emotional stress. She means well, but this isn't her space anymore. We've discussed this as a board and as a family." Her words were blades disguised as bandages. And they landed. A woman from the back nodded solemnly. A man scribbled something onto a notepad. No one looked confused. They had rehearsed this. My hands clenched the folder until the papers inside folded against each other. They didn't just mute my mic. They muted my history. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. That's where it all started. After the meeting, I found Vera outside, standing by her car. She was laughing politely with 2 other women from her bridge club. "Mom," I said too loud. She turned, still smiling. "Let's not do this here, darling." When we were alone, I stepped closer. "You know she's lying." She took a breath through her nose, like she was about to pray. "You should have let her have it. A good daughter doesn't fight her own blood." Something snapped inside me. "So, what am I to you?" I asked. Her eyes finally met mine.
Cold.
Familiar. Convenient. Until you stopped being. There it was. Not the insult. The truth she never meant to say out loud. That's where it all started. Back at the cabin, the air was thicker. Or maybe I was breathing wrong. I sat on the porch steps with a folder in my lap. The speech I never got to give. I opened it, read it out loud to no one. My voice cracked at the edges, not from emotion, but disuse. This property, located beyond designated HOA zoning, was deeded to me in 2017 by Garrett Whitmore, notarized and filed under Jackson County records. I kept going, even when the wind stole my words, even when no one was listening. A black crow landed on my truck's side mirror. It tapped at its own reflection, then stared at me, and didn't leave. Looking back, I should have taken it as a sign. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. I lit the match with hands that no longer trembled. The flame curled around the edge of the paper like it had been waiting for the invitation. My speech flared, folded in on itself, and then died. Just like their version of who I was supposed to be. For a moment, I just held the photo. The match had died, but its scent still clung to the air. My fingers were dusty with soot, my nails etched in black. The flames hadn't just taken my speech. They'd burned through the last thread of belief that this fight could be won with reason. Then I turned the photo over. Faded ink curved beneath the cardboard like a hidden breath. 4D. When you feel alone, remember, you were always the roots. It wasn't his handwriting at its neatest. The ink was rushed, maybe even smudged by a thumb. But I knew those letters. I knew the slope of the R, the small upward tick in the W. It was my father. It had always been him. And they had left this behind, forgotten it, maybe. Or maybe they hadn't seen it as worth hiding. That part still hurts. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. I stood up and walked toward the cabinet in the hallway. It creaked like always, the same tired groan it gave when I was 12 and sneaking cookies after bedtime. I opened drawer after drawer, running my hand over old receipts, Christmas napkins, a broken flashlight. Nothing. Then I noticed the bookshelf in the back corner, our family's display wall. A few trophies from Callista's dance recitals, a yearbook turned to her photo, a ceramic angel I made in 2nd grade but hadn't seen in years. The photos were all face down, not removed, just turned. One by one, I lifted them. Mom and Callista on a cruise. Callista and her ex-husband cutting a cake. Me, blurry in the background. Another of Vera holding Callista's baby shower invitation like it was a diploma. The one photo that used to sit in the center, Dad and me outside the cabin the day he handed me the keys, was missing. They hadn't even replaced it. They just cleared the space. Looking back now, I should have seen it coming. I moved to the study desk. That's where Dad kept all his records, tax files, repair logs, a handwritten schedule of when to replace the water heater. There was a folder marked property. My breath hitched. Inside were copies of cabin records, tax notices, utilities, but nothing with my name. Except for one envelope labeled, backup deed, signed. I opened it and stopped breathing. The signature read Garrett Whitmore, but it wasn't his hand. I turned on the lamp, held the paper up. Wrong angle in the G. The T missing its loop. The ink too fresh for the date. It was forged. Sloppy. Like they didn't think anyone would ever look. Like I would never dare question them. But I did. I pulled out an old spiral notepad of Dad's from the file box marked workshop. Page after page of to-do lists, notes about stain types, a drawing of a new railing he never got to build. The signatures didn't match. They hadn't just forged the deed. They had forged him. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I sat on the floor and folded the papers into my lap. It wasn't just betrayal. It was theft. Of memory, of legacy, of presence. That's where it all started. I leaned against the cabinet, eyes closed, breath slow. A draft snuck under the door, brushing the paper in my hands like it wanted to carry it away. I didn't let go. Minutes passed. Or maybe longer. I don't know. Then I remembered the drawer behind the sink. The one Vera never touched because it stuck. I opened it with a jerk of my shoulder and felt around the back. There it was. A photo. Me, 17. Dad standing beside me, arm around my shoulder. Cabin in the background, just after we painted the shutters red for the first time. I had a smear of paint across my cheek. He was smiling like he'd just handed me the world. They'd missed this one. They tried to wipe me out of the story, but here I was, still clinging to the last proof I belonged. I wasn't forgotten, I whispered. I was erased. And that was different. The ink had barely faded, but it carried the weight of everything I'd ever needed to hear. I held the photo to my chest like it could still give warmth, Like those words, roots, could push back the ache that had become too familiar. My fingers were stiff from clutching it, but I didn't let go. Instead, I folded the image carefully and slipped it into my coat pocket, the same one where Dad used to stash peppermint candies and folded hardware receipts. I needed to believe he'd meant it, those words, that moment, all of it. And if he had, then I needed more than memories. I needed proof. That's where it all started. The Public Records Office hadn't changed much. Same buzzing fluorescence. Same chipped linoleum floor. The woman at the front desk didn't look up when I signed in. She pointed me toward the back room like I was just another Tuesday annoyance. I logged into the zoning database, hands trembling less now. My father's name, my parcel number, the plot lines. And there it was. The thick red boundary that marked the HOA's jurisdiction. And my cabin, my father's cabin just outside of it. Not shaded. Not covered. Not theirs. They'd enforced rules that never reached me. They used imaginary fences. Then punished me for walking on my own land. I printed the map. Circled the boundary line with a red pen. The ink bled slightly into the paper, like the truth had been waiting to soak in. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. Fog hung low as I drove toward Harlan's place. It curled through the pines like breath held too long. His cabin was tucked behind a split-rail fence, one shutter crooked like always. I knocked once. He opened the door before my hand dropped. "Delara," he said, voice rough like morning gravel. "I figured you'd come eventually." Inside, it smelled like wood polish and old paper. He poured coffee, but didn't offer it. He knew why I was here. I handed him the forged deed, watched his eyes scan it without blinking. He didn't speak, just opened a locked drawer and pulled out a sealed envelope. "Your father gave me this the week before he passed. Said, don't let Vera get her hands on this unless Delara's gone." I held the envelope without opening it. My heart beat loud enough to drown out the hum of the fridge. Looking back now, I should have opened it right there. But some things, some truths, you unfold like a wound. The seal cracked under my thumb. Inside, a notarized will. Dated. Stamped. My name, spelled right. The words were clear, unshakable. The cabin and its land belong exclusively to my daughter, Delara Whitmore. The paper shook in my hands. Not from shock, but from something deeper. Relief, maybe. Rage, probably. But mostly recognition. He had tried. He had protected me. "He knew," I whispered. Harlan nodded. "He knew who they were. Just hoped you wouldn't have to find out the hard way." I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I just nodded once, like it was all I could afford. That's where it all started. Back at the table, I scanned the will, saved copies to 3 separate USB drives, labeled each, uploaded one to cloud storage just in case. Then I printed the zoning map, placed it beside the will, watched them sit there, fact and evidence, like twin anchors holding my story in place. They built their walls on lies. I built mine on facts. My laptop dinged softly. Backup complete. I emailed everything to myself. Subject line: insurance. A little dramatic, maybe, but I needed something that would make me smile later. If there was a later. I placed the original will into a plastic sleeve, then into a fireproof box under the seat of my truck. Just in case. As I turned to leave, Harlan's voice stopped me. "Delara, once you bring this out, there's no going back." I looked at him. Really looked. "That's the point," I said. The drive home was a blur, not from speed, but from everything that had just shifted inside of me. My hands stayed steady on the wheel, but my mind spun like a carousel on fire. The envelope now locked beneath my seat, sealed in that fireproof box, felt heavier than any weight I'd ever carried. Not because it was bulky, but because it was truth. Tangible. Undeniable. That kind of truth doesn't just burn bridges, it levels empires. And I knew at the moment I tucked it away, I had become dangerous to them. The fog rolled in thicker the closer I got to the cabin, blanketing the pines and swallowing the gravel path. By the time I pulled into the clearing, it looked like my home had been erased from the earth. Only the crunch of gravel under my tires reassured me I was still on solid ground. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was watchful. Heavy, like the world knew something had snapped. I parked, stepped out slowly. The air smelled like smoke and pine needles. But something else too, metallic, sharp, almost like static before a storm. As I stepped onto the porch, a padded envelope leaned against the front door. No return address.
No marquines.
Just my name, jagged and bold in black Sharpie. That kind of silence? It speaks louder than a scream. I didn't hesitate. Brought it inside, locked the door behind me, slid the knife from the kitchen drawer, and sliced the envelope open like I was gutting the past. A USB drive dropped into my palm. No note, no context, no hint of who had sent it. Just wait. The laptop took longer to boot than usual. Like it knew this wasn't just another late-night Google spiral or a recipe search. The fan kicked in hard, loud, struggling.
Or warning me.
The screen finally lit. The file opened automatically. No password prompt. No play button. Just a video. Callista. She was lounging on someone's back patio like it was a magazine shoot. Cocktail in hand, a lazy smirk stretched across her face. Her sunglasses were pushed to the top of her head like a cheap crown, plastic pretending to be power. She still thinks this is about the cabin, she snorted.
God, no.
I just want to watch her lose. Someone laughed off camera. The sound was thick with malice. Ice clinked in her glass like punctuation. She leaned back, smiling like she was the director of some private performance, and I was the punchline. Not once did she say my name. I was just a silhouette in her way. An obstacle. A target without identity. And somehow that made it worse. Because it was never about the cabin. It was never about property or boundaries or zoning codes. It was about removing me, silencing me, erasing me. I sat there long after the video ended, staring at the frozen frame of her smirk. Not with surprise, but with clarity. This was where it all began. My phone buzzed beside me. I glanced at the screen. An email notification from my bank. Loan 1041932, co-signed on October 16, 2018, has been marked paid in full. My breath caught. That loan. The one Vera had called about late one night when Callista's spa business went under. I remembered the tears in her voice. Rare and calculated. Delara, it's just temporary. She just needs a fresh start.
Please.
We'll figure it out. I had signed. Because I always did. No questions. No conditions. No repayment plan. Just trust. And for 5 years? Nothing. Not a single word. Not a dollar. Not a thank you. And now it was paid. Quietly. Erased like it had never existed. They used my credit. They used my silence. They used me. And when they were done, they erased me like a typo in their story. That was the beginning. I turned back to my laptop. Opened a blank email. Typed in the HOA's legal office address. Subject line: formal contestation of enforcement and property violation. Attachments followed. The video. A zoning map proving the boundary lies within my rights. A scanned copy of the original will. The deed signatures, their inconsistencies under scrutiny. The HOA's own charter, with Section 14.3 highlighted. No member may claim dominion over common space through forged documents or exclusionary practices. I didn't explain in the body of the email.
No emotion. No preamble.
Facts don't need theatrics. They are the stage. I hovered over the send button. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. I clicked. A faint humming sound rose through the cabin. At first, I thought it was the fridge. Then the lights flickered. The router gave one long beep, then silence. The screen went black. I stood, heart thumping, walked toward the door, pulse drumming against my ribs. Out past the clearing, just beyond the trees, a black SUV sat still as stone. Callista's. No movement.
No headlights.
No engine. Just presence. I stepped onto the porch. The fog curled around me like a thread, wrapping around my legs and shoulders. The air was too still, like it had been told to wait. A faint smell of exhaust clung to the breeze, fading, but there. I stepped back inside, picked up my phone. No signal. But then it buzzed. A single text, from a blocked number. Think carefully, Delara. Silence is still an option. I stared at the screen. Not out of fear. Not anymore. But calculation. This wasn't a warning. It was a plea. A final, desperate prayer from someone who knew their performance was collapsing and that I wasn't just an audience member anymore. I was the spotlight. And I had just turned it on. I didn't reply to the message. I didn't need to. Some silences speak louder than screams. Instead, I set my phone down on the table, screen facing up, like I was daring it to blink again. Then I opened the door, just enough to let in the chill without stepping out. The sky had turned copper, the kind of late afternoon light that made shadows longer and truths harder to hide. A breeze lifted my hair from my shoulders, but it wasn't enough to push away the heaviness in the air. Celeste arrived like the storm had brought her. She didn't knock. She walked in with the kind of authority that didn't need permission. Tailored coat, crisp lines, not a single button out of place. Her eyes scanned the room once before she set her phone on the table and tapped the screen. A red light blinked to life. "Let's hear everything again," she said, voice calm but clipped. "But this time, let's not be the only ones listening." Looking back now, I should have been more scared. But I wasn't. Not anymore. That's where it all started. We barely had time to exchange a glance before the cabin door slammed open again. Callista didn't come in alone. She brought the same 4 men. The ones who'd shown up with her the first time, when all they wanted was to scare me into vanishing. Only this time, they didn't pretend to be calm. One of them slapped the eviction notice back on the table like it was a warrant. "You've had your time," he growled. "We're not here to debate." Callista stepped forward, arms crossed, voice too steady. "We're here to clear out trespassers." I didn't move, just looked at Celeste. She didn't flinch. "I'd choose your words carefully," Celeste said slowly. "You're being filmed. Live." That's when one of the men, the tallest, shifted back a step. You could see it in his face. He didn't sign up to be part of a felony live stream. The red light blinked in the corner of the table. That single pulse, quiet and constant, carried more power than Callista's entire army of cowards. They weren't in control anymore. The room had changed. And for the first time in weeks, I wasn't the one being watched. I opened my laptop, clicked into the feed, and expanded the screen. The chat bar was already scrolling. Viewers.
Dozens of them.
Maybe more. "Delara Whitmore here," I said, my voice steady, stronger than I'd heard it sound in years. "I'd like to share a few things." I clicked the first file. The video clip loaded fast. Callista's voice filled the room. "She still thinks this is about the cabin? I just want to watch her lose." She flinched like she'd been slapped. Then I pulled up the zoning map, highlighted in red. This property lies outside the HOA's boundary lines, I said, pointing to the clear exclusion zone. They've been enforcing rules that don't apply. And finally, the scanned will. My father's signature, notarized, dated, bold. The cabin and its land belong exclusively to my daughter, Delara Whitmore. Callista lost it. You recorded me, she screamed. You sick little. Celeste cut in sharply. You confessed. Multiple times. And your threats just turned criminal. Her voice didn't rise. She didn't have to. That's when the cruiser pulled up outside. Headlights caught the edge of the porch. Doors opened. I saw the HOA president first, Mr. Grant, khakis and loafers, the kind of smug that only money could keep clean. He stepped in smiling. The smile dropped the second he saw Celeste. I already sent everything to the state archives, Celeste said, and to the Federal Housing Oversight Board. She tapped the table once. This property has been unlawfully targeted, she said, her voice cold steel. That ends now. Looking back now, I didn't expect the silence that followed. Not from me. From Callista. She didn't scream again.
She didn't beg.
She just stared, as if she couldn't quite believe the spotlight had moved. She'd lived her whole life with everyone looking at her. Now, they were seeing her. I turned to her, not with rage, but with clarity. You always wanted me to stay silent, I said. Now the whole state hears me. Her face didn't crumble right away. That would have been too human. Callista was always too rehearsed for anything as spontaneous as honest emotion. But there was something in her eyes, wide, pinned, cornered like a predator caught in its own snare, that told me the performance was over. The queen of the neighborhood had no more lines left to deliver. They were no longer watching her sparkle. They were watching her burn. The 2 days that followed blurred together in a haze of preparation. Lawyers revisited documents. Journalists circled like birds over something already dead. Every call I received came with the same question. Are you really going through with it?
Yes.
I was. I already had. The morning of the hearing, the county courthouse looked almost the same as it had when I was younger. Old stone walls, peeling paint near the trim, dust floating in the air where sunlight cut through stained glass windows. But everything else had changed. It wasn't the building. It was how people occupied the space. The silence wasn't nervous anymore. It was expectant, strategic. People glanced not to greet, but to measure. No one stood too close to Callista. Not even Vera. News vans lined the curb like predators with microphones. A few familiar neighbors lingered outside, trying to look casual with their sunglasses and phones, pretending this was just another stroll downtown. But their eyes betrayed them. This was the show, and they wanted front row seats. Inside, the judge's voice rang out calm, polished, and cruel in its finality. No theatrics. No dramatics. Just facts. Words like manipulation, coercion, custodial endangerment. Each one landed like a brick on Callista's polished exterior. The courtroom fell into a breathless silence as the clip played again, the live stream. It wasn't just the threats or the forged documents. It was the laughter. Callista's voice, unbothered and amused, mocking the very system she had weaponized for years. That was the part that sealed it. Her own words. And then came the sentence. Primary custody, revoked. Visitation, suspended until further psychological evaluation. Court supervision, mandatory. She didn't cry. Not right away. She smiled at first, that stiff, pageant smile she had worn through bake sales and HOA speeches and Christmas fundraisers. But the reporters didn't chase her. No one turned to comfort her. Even Vera sat motionless, her eyes fixed somewhere far from her daughter's unraveling figure. That's when the crack started. A twitch in her lip, her fingers tightening, then loosening, her knees locking, then buckling slightly as she reached for a bench to steady herself. I watched the whole thing unfold, arms crossed, not from vengeance, but gravity. There was nothing left to prove. The truth had done what I couldn't. It wasn't the verdict that destroyed her. It was being unmasked, exposed in front of everyone she had once bent to her will with charm, manipulation, and fear. That's where it all started. At the next HOA meeting, her name was missing from the attendance sheet. So was Vera's. The tension in the room was thinner. No side glances.
No whispered sidebars. No hierarchy.
Just neighbors, quietly waiting for the meeting to start. When the secretary handed me a small cream-colored envelope, I didn't expect much. But when I unfolded the note, I froze. Your voting privileges have been restored. No flourish. No apology. Just policy. But it landed heavier than any speech. Like a gavel hitting wood. Like a signal that something had shifted. And this time, not in their favor. That weekend, I stopped by the cafe near the post office like I used to. The bell above the door jingled as I stepped inside. Heads turned. Conversations faltered, lowered into murmurs. I didn't look around. I just walked up to the counter, ordered my tea, and sat near the window, the same corner table I had always chosen before I was quietly pushed out of the social fabric. An older woman passed by me, pausing briefly. She was one of Vera's oldest allies, one of the women who used to whisper behind menus and tilt her wine glass in agreement with every one of Callista's digs. She looked at me for a long second, then said softly, "I'm sorry, Delara. We didn't know." But they had. They had known. They just didn't want to choose sides until it was safe. Knowing is easy. Standing up isn't.
But now?
Now, they stood down. That's where it all started. 3 days later, a lunch invitation arrived in a pale pink envelope. Vera's handwriting.
Formal, slanted, panfeli familiar.
Just one line. Let's talk like adults. I didn't respond. Instead, I mailed back an envelope of my own. Inside, a notarized copy of the real will. A printed transaction showing the $30,000 debt I had paid to keep Callista from losing her home. A photo still from the live stream. Callista's mouth open mid-threat. Below it, a caption. "You're on camera, Callista." No note. No return address. No warmth. I wasn't interested in reconciliation. That's where it all started. I changed the lock on the cabin door, not because I was afraid anymore, but because it was mine. My space. My rules. My sanctuary. I could finally claim it without feeling like I had to explain or apologize. Neighbors walked by sometimes. Some nodded, some didn't. A few crossed the street when they saw me. It didn't matter anymore. I drank my tea on the porch at dusk. The lake reflected a sky free of fog. For the first time in a long time, the air didn't feel heavy. No more waiting for the next betrayal. No more second-guessing whether I imagined it all. The apology never came, but neither did the fear. And that was enough. Just as I stood to head inside, I heard the soft creak of my mailbox. I turned. A small, folded piece of paper rested on the lip. No name. Just childlike crayon strokes. Uneven letters. A stick figure with long brown hair standing next to a cabin with a red roof. Underneath, written in shaky lettering, "You're the brave lady." From the video. I stared at it for a long time. Looking back now, I should have cried. But I didn't. I smiled. Because that was enough too. The crayon drawing sat on my kitchen table like it belonged there. Like it had always been part of the house. Part of this whole tangled legacy. I didn't move it. Didn't tuck it away or hang it up. I just let it sit quiet and seen. 4 days later, I sat beneath fluorescent lights in the county investigator's office, listening to the hum of the heating vent and the ticking of the wall clock that had been 2 minutes slow for as long as I could remember. The woman across from me didn't smile.
She didn't need to.
She slid a folder toward me. All signatures confirmed. Mr. Quinn's affidavit lines up. The forensic analyst marked the deed as altered, digitally and manually. My fingers didn't shake as I opened the folder. The pages inside felt heavier than paper. Intentional forgery, she added, with intent to defraud a known beneficiary. That word, beneficiary, landed harder than the rest. Ms. Whitmore, she said, looking at me over her glasses, we're moving from civil to criminal now. I nodded once. That was all I had to give. This wasn't about proving myself. This was about putting the lies on paper and letting the system do what family never would. That's where it all started. Later that afternoon, a clerk handed me a flash drive. Supplemental audio, she said. At home, I plugged it in. Callista's voice spilled out through the tinny speakers. Not screaming, not snide, just small. It wasn't my idea, she said, breath hitching. She said we had to. That if Delara took the cabin, no one would take us seriously again. I didn't need to ask who she meant.
She. Vera.
My mother. The woman who'd once held my hair back while I threw up from nerves before a high school debate. The woman who once told me, "You're stronger than her, Delara. You just don't know how to use it yet." And now she'd rather rewrite his will than risk being irrelevant. And she nearly succeeded. I didn't cry. I just pressed pause, closed the laptop, walked outside. The air was crisp. The kind of crisp that only came after rain had scrubbed everything down. The sky was clean, empty, and I didn't shiver. That's where it all started. The courier came the next morning. A man with kind eyes and too many envelopes in his hands. He handed me one. No return address. Inside, a letter from Vera's attorney. She would not be contesting the findings. She would not be making a statement. Her signature, verified on the forged deed, spoke for itself.
No apology.
Just legal silence. I folded the letter and placed it in a file labeled closure. Not family. Not cabin. Just closure. At the cabin, I gathered everything, every paper, every copy, every printed screenshot of the live stream. The fake eviction notice, the doctored deed, the real will, the forensic analysis, the affidavit from Harlan, the letter from Vera's lawyer, and the photo of me at 17, pain on my cheek, my father's arm around my shoulder. I packed it all into a fire-safe box and carried it to the hatch beneath the cabin floor. The old foundation panel groaned as I lifted it. Dust danced in the light. I placed the box down gently, locked it, buried it in the one place they hadn't reached. Let them burn their paper lies. I built mine into stone. That's where it all started. I was sealing the hatch when I heard it. Footsteps on gravel. I didn't turn around. The knock was soft.
Once. Twice.
Then her voice, through the wood. You're still just the backup plan, Delara. Always were. I didn't respond. Didn't move. Just reached for the door. Turned the bolt. Slowly. Silently. I didn't need to hear her footsteps fade. I knew she'd leave the way she always had, quietly, but not without inflicting one last wound. Her words still clung to the wood, like smoke that wouldn't rise. Backup plan. That's what I'd been to her. Not a daughter. Not a person. Just the insurance policy when her golden girl cracked. But not anymore. That morning, I woke before the sun. The lake outside barely moved, like the whole world was holding its breath. I wrapped my father's flannel around my shoulders, the fabric softer now than it had any right to be. My dog lay curled near the hearth, tail flicking in his sleep. No court dates.
No emails.
No neighbors pretending not to stare. Just silence. And for once, it felt earned. That's where it all started. My mailbox creaked open around 9. I heard it from the porch swing, didn't rush to check. The wind had turned warm again. Late spring was finally staking its claim. Inside, a folded piece of construction paper waited. Crayon lines, a shaky crown drawn above a brown-haired stick figure.
Me.
Next to a red-roofed cabin. The sky behind us was yellow. Sun, not storm. You're the brave lady. From the video. That's what the note said. I smiled, not because it felt like a victory, but because it felt like recognition. That part mattered more. I placed the drawing on the fridge, right where the fake eviction notice had been taped weeks ago. That corner of the fridge used to hold erasure. Now it held witness. That's where it all started. Later that afternoon, I pulled up the floorboard one last time. The fire-safe box was still there, untouched, waiting. I added one more thing. A small voice recorder. Just my words. A story. Not long. Not loud. This place was taken from me, I said, into the mic, then they tried to take me with it. But I stayed. I stayed. I paused. Let breath return. Then finished. You don't reclaim legacy by shouting. You whisper it into stone and wait for someone to listen. I sealed the box. Closed the hatch. Placed a rug over it. If someone found it one day, they'd know I had been here. That's where it all started. Evening drifted in, soft and amber. I sat at the edge of the dock with my father's letter in hand. The one I'd kept through it all.
I read it again. Slowly.
Let the ink sink deeper than before. Then I lit a match. Not out of anger. Out of release. The flame curled around the edge, just like the speech I once wrote. It burned quieter this time. Celeste's message pinged my phone as the paper turned to ash. State record finalized. Title confirmed under your name, exclusively.
No disputes.
I didn't smile, but I didn't cry either. Sometimes justice isn't a verdict. It's the sound of no one knocking anymore. That's where it all started. I walked back to the cabin as the sky deepened. Switched off the porch light for the first time since this began. Not because I forgave them, but because I outlived what they did to me. Some stories don't end with a bang. They end with the absence of footsteps, with a door no one dares knock on again. What would you do if your own family tried to erase you, paper by paper, lie by lie? Let me know in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, subscribe to the channel. More truths are coming.